Today is Tuesday, June 29th, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Podcast.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to the Beer Temple Podcast, the rebirth of the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. As we kind of teased the last episode, we're going to try out some new formats. Shows loved talking to everyone about news and things like that, but my favorite parts of those shows were always getting insights into the people that had the opinions and what they thought and felt and how they arrived at those thoughts and feelings about what was in the news. So we're going to do some segments that hopefully will become access points to that kind of inner life of the people that have chosen to make beer their career. I am Mike Shalau.
And I'm here. I'm still here. I haven't talked yet. I'm Chris Quinn.
So today's kind of jaunt into a new entry point into the minds of the people that made beer their career is going to be called A Beer That Changed My Life. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a pretty free-form conversation around a beer that was some sort of epiphany moment for the people that then went on to make beer central to their being. So today's guest founded the Beer Temple, a seminal bottle shop in Chicago's Avondale neighborhood in 2013.
By the way, I have no idea what Mike is about to say.
It's been topping and populating best craft beer location lists of the city, the country, and the world ever since. In 2015, he started this very podcast as the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. In 2016, he won the Craft Beer Apostle Award from the Chicago Tribune and was named the, quote, high priest of craft beer by the Chicago Reader, completing the unprecedented sweep of vaguely religious craft beer awards from Chicago publications.
How many lame puns can you be awarded?
Yeah. It was yet to be accomplished by anyone else. In 2017, he relocated the Beer Temple across the alley and added an on-premise license, allowing for one of the best curated draft lists anywhere in the world, and a very underappreciated quiet cold room where you can shop for cold beer with the actual compressors far away from you so you don't know why you're cold. In 2018, he stopped updating the Beer Temple's news and awards section, so...
That's awesome.
He's a son, brother, husband, father. He loves the Villanova Wildcats basketball, irons all of his button-downs in his jeans, and is a close friend of mine, everyone, Chris Quinn.
Oh, thank you so much. There's at least one inaccuracy on there. I don't iron my jeans. I do iron all my button-down shirts.
I've seen it, guys. I got the receipts.
I might have. I mean, not my blue jeans, but if they're like more fancy jeans, then yes, I will iron.
Now to your credit, I will say today you are wearing a tie-dye T-shirt and some of the most paint-laden shorts I've seen and you ever wear, to be honest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you look great.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, this is a Dust Brothers original shirt. One of the bros maybe in this shirt.
Our fallen Buster.
Our fallen brother.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, R.I.P.
I mean, he's alive, but
he's dead to me.
Yeah, dead to us.
Yeah. When if he walks by, if it's anything other than to sell me a tie-dye shirt, he's dead to me.
Yeah, he's only allowed and to teach people to tie-dye.
Yes, true. He did teach my children to tie-dye as well.
That was nice.
Well, what's up? Thanks. That was an awesome intro. This format was one that we talked about when we were first talking about coming back, bringing back the show, having you be on as a co-host, Mike. And it was one that you really were kind of pushing for, and I definitely was very interested because I'm with you. I think that you and I, one of the things that we share is that beer means a lot to us more than it just being a drink or even an alcoholic drink or anything like that. And I did not think that I would be the first guest for it, but that's totally fine. That's cool. you'll get your comeuppance.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've never been just a listener of the show. I think I was on the very first episode. But when I think about the show and my favorite episodes of the show, it very infrequently had to do with directly with the topic, with the thing that was being talked about. It more had to do with the interaction of the people, and then like kind of trying to understand how people formed the opinions they formed. So I would like to get more into that with everyone, like, you know, regulars on the show, yourself, myself. That's maybe Edmar.
Right.
That's about it. No. But yeah, so Chris, tell me about a beer that changed your life, or the beer that changed your life.
Let's go with a beer. But it might have been, it's the first one that the first big one that comes to mind. I'm not really someone who had an epiphany beer that got me into beer.
Sure. And just for the format of the show as we go forward, it might be that beer. Like when someone's like, I had this Hefeweizen, it might be that, and that got me into beer, but it hopefully won't be that, because I find it more interesting when you've been into beer.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wait, this is the game changer.
Yeah.
Sorry, not to interrupt you.
No. Because I didn't have a quick answer for you. Just want me to get right into it, or do you want me to tell you a little bit about it?
No, context is whatever. It's a free-flowing conversation.
So for me, I didn't have a beer that just kind of like a light switch went off from the beginning. I had a few later on, but I was always interested in better beer. I knew that there were cooler beers than the ones you just saw at the grocery store or whatever, or liquor store. And I was always interested in them. I remember in college, either I or my roommate had this book of beers from around the world, and they broke them down into stats and ratings, and I would look at one of the best, you know, what the best beers in the world were, and look for them and stuff like that.
That's a pretty normal entry point, I think. I remember a story about my dad, who lives in Connecticut, going printing out the Rate Beer Top 100 and going to his local liquor store and being like, do you have West Vlad?
Yeah.
They're like, no. Do you have Zombie Dust? Which was number 2 at the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very... So this was before Rate Beer existed. I mean, This was a long time ago. This was before there was... maybe before Google existed, definitely before YouTube existed. This was in 1996. I was looking at this book.
Yankees won the World Series that year.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
I was 7.
Well, there you go. And I was looking at beer books.
You were 8.
And Rogue Shakespeare Stout was the highest rated beer in the book, I remember. And
such an old sentence.
So there's this store near where I went to school called State Line Liquors, which is still like regarded as one of the best beer stores on the East Coast. I had no idea. It was just the big liquor store near us. And they had some of that stuff. They never had the Shakespeare Stout though, but they had some Sam Smith and they had stuff like that. And I got really into no, I don't. That's not going to be the one that changed my life. But anyway, so I was kind of into it, but wouldn't always drink them and stuff like that. But I was a little bit into different beers. I thought like Red Dog for a while was better, so I thought it was cool because I was drinking Red Dog and stuff like that. And then I went to like my first beer fest probably in '98.
Where were you living at this time? Like
in Delaware. Yeah, and Sam Calagione poured me a beer off a jockey box, which was kind of cool.
Through a Randall?
But it was memorable in how personable. Like I remember him as a person. Like, oh yeah, that one guy was the guy I remember from the whole thing, and I didn't realize it was him until years later.
He's arguably the most recognizable like public beer figure,
right?
Outside of maybe the Boston Beer Company guy. What's his name?
Jim Cook.
Yeah, he's in the ads, but like outside
or
of that,
Garrett Oliver. But I think he's above Garrett Oliver.
I think so. In like the larger Louvre of people, like it's like
for good reason. I mean, he's incredibly
handsome,
charming. He's just a charming person.
Yeah.
And then I went to like a couple other like little mini. I went to like a barley wine fest in like '99, and
wow, you were in early.
2000.
Just like a little 10-year-old Alex Kidd running around.
He was still drinking Sky vodka or whatever he was drinking at that time before he got into beer. But it was, I still have the shirt. I bought a shirt from it. It was in the basement of a bar in Philly. And the name of the event was Split Thy Skull. It was a high octane beer fest.
Because of Skull Splitter. Like
maybe
that English beer that
it
was
probably
like the
was
strongest beer in the world when it was like 9% alcohol.
Right. Exactly. And it was Split Thy Skull 6 or 7 too. So it had been going on for a little while. It might have been 2001 or something like that by that point. But anyway, so then I was lucky because Philly had a pretty robust and mature craft beer scene compared to anywhere east of Colorado, I'd say, really.
Yeah.
So it was really Philly, Colorado, San Diego. Like those were the three. And Portland. Sorry, Portland.
Right.
And those four.
Well, that was a time where it was like it really was just those kind of areas,
Yeah.
right? And maybe there was like people thought of other parts of New England had some of that going on, but like there were beer cities where you're like, oh, they have a bunch of breweries, like
right. So like
Milwaukee and shit.
Chimay. Like Philly was the first place that Chimay was ever brought in, as far as I have been told. So like we're talking a long time ago, and like, so anyway, I moved to Chicago. It's years later. It's probably 2000, maybe 5 at this point. I'm guessing.
And so you had been casually drinking better beer, and not.
I like, I had seen different types of beers out there. I wasn't really interested. I thought, honestly, some of the U.S. craft breweries I really was not sure about because there were so many bad ones in that first bubble.
Sure.
There were so many like really bad ones. And there was like the Pete's Wicked, which people were really into. I never was really into Pete's Wicked. There was... is it Saranac Pale Ale?
Yeah, Saranac White was a big one, I remember.
But the Pale Ale and the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale were way too bitter for me. And so I moved out here, and it was winter, and I was at Sheffield's. I was in the back bar, which they had just opened. It was called the Beer School. Mm-hmm. And
it was like Phil Cool.
Phil Cool started it. Phil Cool, who is now with Breakthrough, but he basically was one in a long line of amazing beer directors at Sheffield's, which was one of the first big craft beer bars in Chicago.
Yeah, and one that was like... It was trying to be modern, right? Like nothing against like the beer bars before, but they're mostly import based. Like kind of like we have the best Belgian beer, we bring in the German stuff, and some local beers. Not that they weren't supporting it, but like they wanted to be like a more modern version of what a craft beer bar was. Were they smoking meat and stuff then too?
It was before that.
And it's also interesting that they're pretty close to Wrigley, so you get this crowd that like you can't always just be like curating the most pristine list of the things that you're supposed to like as a craft beer nerd. So it was a good, cool place to go where you could do all of the things, right?
Yeah, and they didn't have Miller Lite. I think maybe on Cubs days outside they had an awesome a beer garden. And maybe out there just on Cubs games days they would do something like that. But normally they wouldn't. And they had this little back bar which would only be open sometimes, and there was a fireplace, and there was like a projector playing like old concerts, and Phil was back there. I didn't know him, and I had met with 2 other people, and I lived right around the corner. They left, and I was sitting there, and I walked over. I sat at the bar then, and I ordered a beer that changed my life, which was the very prestigious Dogfish Head Pumpkin Ale. And that's the beer.
It's funny. I don't think a lot of people that were listening to the show would have thought that. They might have clocked Dogfish Head, given that you were in the Mid-Atlantic. But I don't
years
think
later
anyone would look at you now and think, well, that guy, the beer that changed his life was a pumpkin beer. And so what was it about it in that moment that was interesting to you or that caught you?
I realized as I was having that beer and looking around at that beer list and what they were putting together there, that there was something important happening.
Yeah.
And it was happening in America, and that because Sheffield's was giving a lot of, they weren't dedicated to only this or only that type of beer, but they were heavily Midwest, which is cool. Like they were trying to showcase how much great beer is being made in the Midwest. And coming from a more wine family, my aunt at the time owned a wine shop and stuff like that. I was aware of like Providence and stuff like that. And I thought it was amazing that world-class beer and stuff that was so exciting was being made in the U.S., in the Midwest, not a little bit in Chicago at the time, but not much. I don't even know if Half Acre was around then.
Right. But just that it was being made even in Delaware was close. And there were only 2,000 breweries maybe then, maybe less.
Right.
And so the locality of that is different than if now where it's well, this one is literally made 3 blocks away. And it's
sure.
So,
and I probably got that beer. I mean, I don't remember why I got that beer, but there's a good chance I got it because I was a little bit intimidated, but knew Dogfish because I'd had it in Delaware and wanted to start somewhere familiar, and then got to talking to Phil. And I still remember Surly Darkness was on tap, and they had Founders KBS in bottles, and they had Breakfast Out on draft, and different time, right? And that stuff was way too crazy. They had Moloko, I think. They had a lot of stouts.
Yeah.
And
when it was later in the year, I'm imagining things I remember it was cold.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it was cold.
Yeah.
So, but it was before Surly Day. There was no Surly Day, but then
right.
It was just a beer they put out.
Right.
So very different. But I started then going home and looking up. Then Beer Advocate and Rate Beer did exist, and that's when I started looking at that sort of stuff, like getting into what are these beers? I want to try them. Coming back to Sheffield's, and they had a book that you could go through. It was a thick beer book, beer list, and just going through it and being all right, I'm going to try this one, I'm going to try that one, I'm going to try this one. And that's, I think, how I got well-rounded in global styles, because I would be having all these beers from all over the world. And they did have a little beer school thing, if you check this off, and they would give you your card, and they gamified it.
Yeah. What I find really interesting about the way you answered the what happened in the moment, what was it about that beer in the moment question, is that you are someone that I think of as being incredibly perceptive and articulate about the organoleptic experience you're having immediately in front of you and you're drinking. And the reason this beer was one that changed your life was none of that. You didn't. You weren't it was pumpkin. It was you saw through a prism into this rainbow. A single bead of light into a rainbow of what was going on, and knowing that there was something interesting happening that wasn't necessarily the thing that was being presented most of the time to you.
Right.
Which I find that's part of the reason I thought this would be an interesting show, because I would have thought what you would have said had more to do with it just tasted like this, and then that put me into this place, and but no, it uncovered for me something that I could get really into, and I think that's really a beautiful.
Yeah,
sentiment, a beautiful thing.
Does it screw up all your follow-up questions?
No. I honestly, I didn't really have many follow-up questions, but I think that. And then, so you went from that into more international styles and getting into beer at large, and then how do you transition from drinking a pumpkin ale to learning about beer? You started the YouTube page? Is that what the tastings?
No, that's not how it worked. So now we're doing an origin story. So yeah. No, that's fine. Well, first of all, I was drinking all sorts of stuff. I was drinking definitely a lot of domestic, and I was drinking it by style, but I was drinking stuff from all over the world as well. I had Skull Splitter. That's the first time I had Skull Splitter. First time I had Unibrews, Le Fin du Monde. First time I had probably a lot of English beers and stuff like that as well. And I remember distinctly that's the first time I had Allagash White. I remember Gumball Head being a big deal back then.
In Bombers.
Yeah. I remember having, not necessarily right around that year, but right around that time, on draft, the Southern Tier Creme Brulee Stout.
The original pastry stout.
If you ask me, it is, or that series they did was, and the way the bartender, I'm saying, all right, I'll try that, because I would just kind of go through the list, and they're like, why don't you try it first? And they gave me like a fraction of maybe 1 ounce.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think it was less. And I drank it and I was like, oh, that's enough. That's enough for me. And they're like, yeah, I think so too. So for all of you guys out there, I don't know if it's like with you, Mike, but so many times if I say I don't like a style, there's a certain percentage of people who think it's only because I haven't had the right one.
Sure.
Like eventually, it was definitely that with hazies and hazies, pastry stouts. I pretty much don't dislike most of them, and especially most of the modern styles of them. Hazies, there's a bunch of hazies that I actually think are pretty good.
Yeah.
But it is funny when people are like, well, no, you don't like it because you haven't had a good one. And I'm like, I've had a lot, man.
I'm sure I don't have that interaction as much as you do, given that you're more like public facing and things. But most of the time I find if I have that conversation with someone, if I end up having the beer they're talking about, it is the perfect example of why I don't like that thing. It's everything that I'm just like, no, that's it. That's
Well, that was also an epiphany for me. There's a bunch of beers that changed my life. Let's go. Let's keep going, because there's other beers that changed my life another way. But you asked me about this. Another beer that changed. Well, you want to keep on this track?
We can keep on the pumpkin one, because I just had one prepared question that came to me where it pumpkin and Dogfish Head generally I find interesting because, and I don't know if you think about this ever, but it's something that I think about, is that they are kind of the model or archetype for a lot of the worst things about craft beer. Mm-hmm. They made some of the best beers then, but they were kind of let's throw some weird stuff in there and use that as like a marketing tool. Yep. And then also kind of the cult of personality brewery, which is much more of a niche thing. It's not nearly the same as Sam Calagione having a TV show and being incredibly charismatic, but there's plenty of breweries out there that are popular because of beliefs in the cult-ish beliefs about the people who run them. Mm-hmm. And I just want to, do you ever think about it in that way? If so, how does it make you feel that the beer that changed your life came out of that oeuvre? Was like kind of an origin of that?
I will, and I'll also apologize because, hold on, let me check. Yeah, the HVAC just came on. So sorry, guys, we're literally in the bowels of the store right now. So sorry about the background sound. But anyway, this Studio B, this ain't. But yeah,
Studio BT.
Yeah,
Studio Beer Temple.
Very good.
Thank you.
So I'd say that. I was definitely aware that there was marketing that back then, like even high alcohol, they were making the highest alcohol stuff. They had the 60, 90, 120. They had a whole bunch of stuff.
It's almost cute to look at now and be like, oh, wait until you see what people are going to do with the playbook you created.
But talk about like being on, remember Theobroma? Which was a Mexican chocolate and cinnamon beer.
Don't get me wrong; they did some incredibly cool things.
Way early,
and with really good intentions. Like doing like those historic beers. It was more just a question of like, how do you generally like what
mixed bag?
How do you feel about what happened from that?
I think that there's so you and I have talked about this.
That's why we're trying to get on the show,
right? And I cannot. So it's like and I should know who said this, but who talked about porn on the Supreme Court?
I don't
know. Yeah, right. It's like, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Right.
It's definitely that for me, and it isn't cut and dry. But I'd say, I think Dogfish Head was definitely fighting a much more uphill battle, was trying to gain attention, was trying to be bombastic, was trying to use this kind of guerrilla marketing, was trying to do things that they were just on the okay side of it to me, where oftentimes like Brewdog is like just on the other side of it for me.
Yeah.
And then there's other people who are like way on the wrong side to me. Yeah.
And I think if you're the one with the machete hacking the way through the jungle, like you get a lot, you can get away with a lot of that stuff too, where it's you're doing some wild stuff, but it's not because you saw a playbook.
Right.
It's because it's an interesting, it's an innovative way to make the beer and to present the beer. Like that's where a lot of the interesting innovations happen a lot now too.
I mean, we only have a few neons in our shop, and I basically commissioned every one of the ones that we opened with. And, I have an Omnipollo one.
Yeah.
And I mean, think about that. They are the ones who are making slushy. They invented slushy beers.
Yes.
Smoothie beers.
Sours.
They invented maybe milkshakes as well, or they had like a proto milkshake. They were doing like German chocolate cake. They were doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Why, to me, was I so... Why did I have so much respect? I don't follow them very closely anymore, but I had so much respect for them versus people who are doing essentially the same stuff now.
Well, because when they were doing it, no one was doing it. So, like, one of my pet peeves when we talk about it is people using the word innovation for things that are in no way innovative. It's something that is, different, but it's not something that hasn't been done or something that's forging a new path.
Yeah.
And I think that there was a period in beer when people doing those beers were legitimately innovating what could be done in craft beer. And there's again, this is you're supposed to be the interviewee here, but what I think is that there's like that you can tell when people are doing that because it's something inside them that popped into their head and they had this idea, and you can do it when you can tell when someone saw someone else do it. Right. And then realize that either they could do it better or that they could profit from it.
Yeah. And, everyone has to make up their mind as to where that line is for them. So to answer that first question, I noticed it, but I thought that it was not only good or acceptable, but I really admired Dogfish Head's willingness to brew beer they knew that not all of their drinkers would like. Some of our people who drink our beer will not like this beer, and we're still going to make it. And that's something you don't see a lot.
Right. And from a producer's perspective, to do it at like 200 barrels is pretty insane.
Yeah, right.
Not just messing around on one barrel.
So I think we're going to take a little bit of a break and then come back and talk more.
Welcome back to the Beer Temple podcast. I am Mike Shalau. I'm here with my co-host / guest, Chris Quinn. Mm-hmm. And we're doing something a little different today. As we were telling you earlier in the podcast, that we're trying to find different entry points into the minds, hearts, and lives of the people that love beer so much that they come on a podcast to talk about it instead of being with their families. This version of that episode is a beer that changed my life. And right before we stopped the first segment, I kind of derailed you to ask a question about the first beer that you said was pumpkin. But before that, you'd said you had come up with a second beer kind of on the spot as we were talking about it, which I find great. Changed your life so much you couldn't remember it until we were talking about things that have changed your life. What is that beer?
Well, it's funny. Like it's the same as you said with the last one. It had nothing. This one did have more to do with the taste. It was Pliny the Elder, and I had traded for it.
What is that?
Pliny the Elder is a double IPA from Russian River. Everyone who's listening to this show knows it. You may not know that it's the original archetypal double IPA, invented the style literally.
DDH.
It's the first beer called a double IPA. They invented that style, which is kind of cool. But anyway, I didn't know that at the time I had it. I had traded for it.
What'd you trade for it?
I traded, I think, a KBS, still called a Kentucky Breakfast Stout at the time on the label. So that gives you an idea for years, guys. If you guys don't even remember, it actually used to say Kentucky Breakfast Stout on it. But they weren't allowed to say that because I think of the state, or who knows why they weren't allowed to say it. So anyway, I traded that, and I think my extra was a Goose Island, like demolition or something, some bomber. And I think I probably wasn't, I picked it up off of like the sale bin at Benny's or something.
What a good trader you are.
I didn't know, man.
I remember having that beer. I can't remember from the life of me what it was. I think it was when I was working at a Benny's.
Right.
Is it either Belgian Golden Ale? Is that like a...
I don't know. The guy probably wasn't super happy because his extra was... a beer that also maybe changed my life. It was a bomber of Sculpin, which was the first time I'd ever had it, and it was awesome.
Yeah, he lost.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, he got a KBS. A KBS at the time, was harder to get than a Pliny.
You know,
it was.
In a weird way, KBS is a beer that changed my life, but not because I had it. I have had it, but because I was working at a store called West Lakeview Liquors, and everything was about beer. It was so important, and stuff was rare, and you had to come. It was like stuff from Europe. And then my favorite customer, Greg, the FedEx guy, loved beer more than any.
Great guy.
Great guy. Loved beer more than anyone I knew coming into that store. Came in one day, and we'd sold out of it. And he just goes, "Oh, that's okay. It's just beer." And like people would come in, you were selling it one bottle at a time behind the register.
Right.
And these people were trying to get more and being kind of jerks about it because I was like, I can't. And then this guy who's just like, honestly cares about beer in a way that I love very much was like, yeah, I don't, it's just, that's fine. It's just beer.
That's awesome.
And that, like, in that moment, I needed to hear that because everything was becoming so much like the chase and the importance of these things just because they aren't around. And I was like 23 and it could have gone down a very dark path.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's funny. No, that's very much about how Pliny the Elder changed my life in the same way.
Yeah.
Because it was the one that I could not get locally. It was very highly rated. Mm-hmm. I was not a trader, but I was like, I want to try this beer. And I did, and it was really, really good. It was an awesome double IPA, but it was a double IPA.
Yeah.
It was not transcendent of the style. It was an exemplary example of the style.
Yep.
And that changed my life too, because I was like, that was the first one where it was this coveted thing that was on a pedestal in my mind. I don't think I hadn't had Westy 12 yet or anything like that, which was the number one beer in the world. But this Pliny, and I was like, it's awesome. This is a really good beer.
Yeah.
It's still beer. It's still a beer, and that gave me some context going forward. I think from there on, that I kept with me forever. Like I learned quickly that stuff is not. It's always going to be beer, and there's nothing that's going to really transcend it for you. Now, I've had beers that have been amazing that way.
Yeah.
But they're still beer. I mean, one I would put in that category would be the first time I had barrel-aged Abraxas, which I didn't know anything about it.
Bonkers beer.
I mean, it was before it really fully blew up. Someone from Perennial had come up, was doing a tasting, and opened it up, and it was maybe one of the first years that they did this barrel-aged, and we were all like, whoa, this beer is amazing. Everyone, try it. It was awesome. But, it's all just beer, man.
Right. I had almost different beers, but almost an identical experience. So I wanted to try Heady Topper so bad. And this was probably like 2012 or 13 or maybe 14. And my roommate was a beer trader at the time, so I had him set up a trade that was a 6-pack of Zombie Dust for a 4-pack of Heady Topper. And I remember getting the Heady Topper and being super excited. It was really fresh, and drinking it and just being like, this is fine, but it's not as, like, I would rather have the 6-pack of Zombie Dust.
Right.
I'm like, damn, I lost. And But it was a great beer. I enjoyed having it, but it showed in me like I'm not in this for the trappings of that. They're interesting, and I do enjoy having those beers, right? But almost all of them, not like don't live up to the hype. Some of them are well worth it, and are transcendent for the categories and transcendent for what you think people can do with those flavors. But more often than not, you have these things you chase after, and I'm a person who, when you do that, the actual organoleptic experience of it tends to not deliver. Some people, it can amplify it. Like I remember going, first time I went to Hill Farmstead, the only time I went to Hill Farmstead, but driving up there, like I could feel myself getting excited. And all the beers were fantastic, but I have no idea if they were actually as good as I thought they were, or if it was that they were super fresh, or if it was just that like I was just like, I'm sure they are. Like they're some of the best beers I've had, but...
Well, here's the crazy thing is... They were that good.
Right.
They were that good because that's what you were literally experiencing. You were experiencing that way. And it's not you. So there is a like people, I think, sometimes confuse that. And I know you're not one of them. It's just how we talk.
No, I am.
And you are literally, because of the moment, tasting it better. It's not... I tricked myself into it. Your mind is actually tasting it. The taste is actually better to you at that time because of what's happening. It just tastes better. The experience, those of you out there, think of the best beer you've ever tasted. And I guarantee you there is a memorable experience tied to it. You were with a friend. You were at a really crazy tasting. You were at an event. You were doing something. It's not, it was part of a trade. I was by myself and I just popped it open before I went to bed and drank it. And that's the best beer I ever tasted. No way. It always tastes better because of something else. And you're not tricking yourself. That is how our brains taste things, man.
Right.
I'm convinced.
And like the definition of taste is like that experience, right? It's not the gas chromatograph. It's like, it is your experience, and it is wholly subjective, which then... we might have been like skipping things of like how we got very obsessed with like the way things tasted, and then all of a sudden it was like or the way things were presented, and then like what we're talking about now is how that was shattered. But it's important to talk about it because like we still had great experiences tasting those things we were just talking about, the Heady Topper and the Pliny the Elder.
Now, but for me, I wasn't I wasn't saddened by it necessarily.
Yeah, I wasn't saddened either in the one I brought up. It was a realization.
Maybe a little let down, but then also like, oh, okay, it's a beer. Right. It was a learning experience.
And it was part of it was exciting because like when I was drinking it, Chicago beer was just starting to like kind of really start going. And I remember having it and being like, well, I'd rather have that zombie dust. Like, and I'd rather just like, for all the effort it was to trade that, I'd rather just go get some Daisy Cutter. And that was pretty cool. And it makes you understand that, at least for me as someone who wanted to make things, I was working at Pipeworks at the time and I was kind of making stuff, but nothing was my idea. And for someone who wanted to make stuff, it's like, oh, you can, it's not easy, but you can make stuff that's really good. And there aren't really these monoliths. At least in American brewing at the time, there weren't really these monoliths of like, these guys are doing something so different from what you would ever be capable of doing. Like I'm sure there's some like German beers where like when you have to refine, and then you have to be able to appreciate these nuances. Like there are things that there's certain breweries doing that I would never be able to do. But it's like this moment of like, if I really want to do this and I really work hard at it, like I could probably make something that would at least please me and enough people for me to think it was worthwhile, as much as this beer has pleased me.
One of the cool things about, because you talked about in your intro that I started this podcast whatever year I started it, but
2015.
So I think in 2012 or
before you started the store.
Yeah, I had the video a tasting podcast, which is still on iTunes, I think, and it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
As well.
I've watched a lot of them.
And the cool thing is, you can see at the time me tasting things often, most of the time, for the first time. So I tasted the first batch of Tilken ever to come to the States for the first time. I tasted Ninja vs. Unicorn, I think, for the first time. I tasted Heady Topper, and Surly Abrasive, with really no context. They, I think Heady Topper, even at that point, was number 3 in the world, and Abrasive was number 7 or 8 in the world. They're the two highest rated cans.
I remember that
in the world.
Episode of that show.
And
an episode.
Yeah, it was. It is interesting before the hype really gets that crazy to try them. And I remember liking the Heady Topper because it was so unique in its profile.
At the time.
Yes, at the time.
It's probably
Isn't that amazing?
Probably a different show.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That's what I like the most about it. It had a different perspective, and I thought that was really cool.
That is really cool. Like that so...
But
I think it's more interesting than just the specific beers, but the idea of being able to taste someone's perspective goes into that like kind of category of like I was able to look through the looking glass and see that this whole world existed that I knew nothing about. But like that idea of tasting people's perspective is, I find, the most exciting part about the good versions of that kind of cult of personality brewery that I was kind of deriding before. Like there are good versions of it because like I want that thing real bad. I want to drink someone's beer and be able to like I feel like I can know who this person is in some way because I've had their creative output, and I love that so much.
There's a lot of. I'm thinking right now. There's a ton of them out there that are good examples of. I would put De La Seine there. I'd put Cantillon that way. I'd put all the lambic blenderies. Well, most of them anyway.
Well, those are even cooler because they're like specific. They're people's palates blending that batch.
Yeah.
Like, I guess that applies to a lot of that stuff. Not just the blending, but it's that someone's specific palate created those things. But I think that is another entry point to that, where it's like this is bigger than just like the way these things taste, because like. Even though that Heady Topper wasn't the most transcendent thing I had, it was definitely different than things that are happening now.
Yeah.
I might have liked the Zombie Dust more or as much, or would, when you factor in the hassle as much, but like it was definitely something new and different, and it didn't hit me in the way that it obviously hit a lot of other people that produce beer right now, because it obviously inspired a lot of things.
I know. The bottle caps inspired those people. They're inspired. I never forgot when I saw the bottle caps on that check-in. It really changed my life. Just kidding, guys. Kind of, not really.
It kind of did. So on that, like, I remember you won the Craft Beer Evangelist Award, which is an award they give every infinity years. I remember you like opening that store and like loving curating things, and then being upset by people looking at tags of rate beer ratings that you put on the shelves, but like...
No, I didn't put rate beer
people were looking up rate beer ratings on their phones.
Yeah.
And that's only gotten worse.
Yeah.
Like, I would imagine people...
Yeah, kind of. I've just gotten used to it now. Sure. I've gotten kind of calloused to it. I used to not... You know what? Maybe it hasn't gotten better. I think we have now a reputation where people kind of take our word for it.
Right.
Or they either, if they're asking, they're genuinely asking... If not, there are definitely people who don't want your opinion because they want to know what Untapped says. There's those people too, and we know to like kind of leave those people alone or ask them. We don't leave them alone. We ask them if they need any help.
That's
and they're like, nah, not really.
A larger existential conversation about trust in the algorithm and trust in crowdsourcing of things. So, or both together.
It's not. Guys, well, the people out there our listeners are highly knowledgeable, but so I would think that they know that as well. But the Untapped algorithm is, it's interesting. So Tavour is like a huge, beer online shop, and they have like a wholesaler now. We can buy through their sister company, as I call it. It's still them.
I've never understood how any of what they're doing is legal, but
I'm not sure either.
I'm not a lawyer.
But they're not distributing, but they're doing something where they set it up where you buy directly from the brewer. They help set up the self-distro, and then there's a delivery company here who just does logistics, who happens to be a distributor. But anyway, we don't buy much from them, and they asked why. Like, no, not why, but like, is there anything we can do? Like, what are you interested in? It was bullet points. It was, are you interested in the rarest beers or the most highly rated beers? Are you interested in finding exclusive breweries, or are you finding... And it was 3 options, and they were all around that Are you looking for like the rarest or the best priced? That was like another one. And I wrote like a fairly long answer because normally I would just junk, I would just not answer it. But
so this is an email that was just kind of a stock email or it was something that someone had actually written to you, or was it like a boilerplate?
It was boilerplate probably for the Chicago, maybe for the Chicago market at best.
Got it.
Now they did write me back individually and like very shortly afterwards. And basically what I said is, what I want is for you to tell me why you brought this beer in. I want some perspective, and I want to know why you thought it was important to bring this brewery in. I don't want 2 sentences taken from the brewery's website and an Untapped rating. And I didn't say that they were doing it. I was just saying that's what I don't want.
Right.
And so I wasn't accusing them of doing it. And then I said, you're asking if I want rare beer. I was like, I said, you rely heavily on Untapped ratings because that's what they always promote beers with when they're selling. Hey, available this week is this beer, and they give the Untapped ratings and stuff like that. And I say you put a lot of value in Untapped ratings, but that's going to naturally skew to fruited IPAs, hazies,
right.
and adjunct sours.
Well, this is the problem with the algorithm, right? It's self-perpetuating.
Right. And I said, we have those in Chicago. And people aren't just going to, I actually deleted a whole bunch of other stuff because I was like, and then with your markups that you're putting on there, these will be more expensive and it's going to be hard for people who don't know these breweries. And then I also said, plus, all the super hyped stuff is going to go, this is stuff I all deleted, but I said, it's first going to go to the brewery only. What's left over, they will send it to Vor. What is left over, you're going to send to me. Like so it's not really that rare. But what I did write was, what is rare?
Right.
Mild.
Right.
A good mild
right.
is much more rare in my shop than a hazy is.
They made more Bourbon County Rare the last time they released it than I've made at Is-Was since we started in 2019.
Right, exactly. So, and they did get back and they're like, that's great. I totally agree. We have a team of writers and cicerones who can't wait to give you more information about this stuff. So it's like
the worst answer.
Right. I mean,
let's curate an answer to you so that you'll buy stuff from us, which I guess is what they're supposed to be doing, right? But that's just like, I don't know. It just seems so bloodless in a way.
Right. I mean, was it the cicerones saying this is why I decided that our company should bring it in?
Right.
No. It was this company brought this in, and I was told to taste it and say why the bottle cap ratings are really good and maybe throw in some technical terms. That is me. This is me being me, guys. This is me being cynical. Right. This is just how I am. So I might be totally wrong.
To be very uncharitable to them and to believe that it's just that they're saying it's because of the algorithm, and then they're trying to pretend like it's not because that they thought they would sell better. Would you prefer if they just said our analytics say that this is the thing that people want to drink? Would that make you buy their beer anymore, or would you just prefer the honesty? Because you're clearly not buying beer from them.
I would not buy the beer more. I would maybe prefer the honesty, but I also, I'm not sure. We'll see. I mean, I've talked to some other shop owners here in their kind of test run of using this model here. And from the get-go, I was like, I don't think how much it's going to work. And other people are like, oh, my God, they are going to ruin the game. They're so smart. They're so ahead of everything. This is going to disrupt everything. And I'm not so sure.
That's why you build a customer base like how you build it, right? That's why you do what I'm doing, where you get people that actually believe in you as people and what you choose to do with your life and your business, rather than people that are just trying to find the lowest price for the most bottle caps.
Right.
I don't know. But I don't know how long or what the survival of places that are behaving cynically in the way that we've painted them. Not that it's necessarily what they are doing, but because if you just all have the right algorithm, it's all going to kick you the same stuff, and then it's going to create a feedback loop that just creates more of the same things. And so smaller companies, startup companies like that are just going to get kind of run over by bigger companies, I guess. I don't know.
I guess. I mean,
if you take the human element out of it, they all become the same company. I feel like what are you doing at that point? Anyway,
Yeah, I mean,
we've
not-
gotten far
not to go
afield
there.
from
Yeah, we've
beers that
gone
have
far
changed your
afield.
life.
We've got 7 minutes before we're supposed to take a break. I don't know if we're going to take another break or end it. Or we do have some letters we could get to. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to talk to in the beers that change your life or where that has led to, Mike. But if you do, we have 6.5 minutes to discuss before we can break and then come back and talk more or whatever you want.
Yeah, I think this has been an interesting foray into some new style and approach. We'll probably get better at the timing of it and not end 7 minutes before the.
We could probably do that too.
But I hope let us know if you found this conversation interesting. What parts of it you liked, what parts of it you didn't like, and if you think you want to do more of these. I mean, we're going to do more of them until you tell us to not do more of them. But it would be helpful to know your favorite parts of it so that we can get better at honing in on and refining that, and then the algorithm can tell us what beers changed our lives.
Exactly. We'll see which beer bottle capped my life. I will say, just so I can kill some time, if you do want to send stuff, you want to send it to insiders@craftbeertemple.com. Thank you guys who have been sending us electronic letters in that fashion. It's insiders@craftbeertemple.com. You can send a actual written letter. Have not gotten one yet. The first show did just go out because it took me a while, just like yesterday, but that's okay. But that's going to go to 3173 North Elston, Elston Avenue in Chicago. That's 60618. That's the Beer Temple, and you can send it to me. Any letters penned or typed or penciled or however you want to do it was always super duper appreciated. But I do think we're going to cut and probably. You want to do some letters?
I'd like to actually ask for people to send letters about beers that changed their lives. Ooh. And then maybe when the last 5 minutes of this segment come up again, we can read some other people's letters about how they got into it.
What an amazing idea. That's great.
Send them in to all the places Chris just said.
Yeah. Let us know what beers changed your life. Let's take a break and then come back with more of the podcast. Welcome back to the Beer Temple podcast. I am Chris Quinn. I am joined by my co-host Mike Shalau. We have not mentioned the third member of the team so far. Shame on you, my co-host. You got to learn.
Well, he's been doing a great job. It's like he's like an umpire. When he's doing his best job, you don't even know he's there.
It's true. I mean, his fades are so
smooth.
They're so smooth.
They're so tight to his temples, and then it just pops up.
It's amazing. Most people don't know that he's a barber by trade.
That's right. Slickest fades. It's insane. You should check him out. People say, right?
Yeah.
You should see my hair right now. I've
Surge
been
fades.
in a barber shop in 18 months.
Check him out on the gram. He's there.
Gets faded.
Anyway, we ask you guys to write letters, and you guys do. So thank you very much for that. But I wanted to read a few. I also will say the emails, electronic letters, come to me, and I am terrible about I'm really bad about replying to emails generally. Work emails, just today I was getting yelled at for not writing people back, or not yelled at, but like, come on,
Who's
Chris,
yelling at
please.
you?
Just these people who just
boss.
needed information for an event I'm doing with them in 2 days, which we had given to them, but they wanted it in writing.
You got 2 more days.
Right, exactly. And it was, I'm not going to get into it. I like these people very much. They've been very good to me. So my point being, I'm sorry, but I will say, let's just read some. Let's just get right into it. So I have an email. I will say that sign your emails the way you want to be referred to. Okay, if you put your name, we're going to put your name. If you just say, you can say, hey, my name's Jason, but refer to me this way or something, whatever you do.
Any gnome to beers you might have.
Exactly. So anyway, this comes from Jason Berg, and his subject was, I missed the Insiders Roundtable podcast. Well, you're going to have an Insiders Roundtable soon, I promise. That format will be coming back. This was from a couple months ago. And he said, of all the podcasts that have been disrupted in this past dumb year, I think I miss the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable podcast the most. I appreciate the couple remote episodes a few months ago, and I look forward to more when you are able to pick up again. I hope things are going all right overall. No reply necessary. Cheers. I will make a note that I have not replied, but thank you very much, Jason. I appreciate that very much. We have another one from, let me see, how does he say it? Yeah, from Eric Oliver, and he just said, this just came today, and he said, I just want to say I love the new format. I am so happy you are back. Yeah, there you go. So
Nice.
Yeah, so that's nice as well. But now we have one that came in a little while ago, and a really nice one from the Old World Beer Lover. Again, that's how he signed his email, so that's how I'll call him. So the Old World Beer Lover writes, hello everyone. Glad the podcast is back. As someone who has worked and been in the industry in various ways, it's more of a hobby. I love hearing what people have to say, and to be able to have good conversations with full-time industry folk, and from what I learned from this show. I wanted to point out something Chris said regarding the lack of imports in Chicago relative to other areas of the country. It was also said that there are so many local brands carried by even fewer distributors so that they are getting squeezed out. But this is exactly what has happened to imports for years now. I can only speak for what I've seen in the Chicago market, but craft has been squeezing import and seems to have the preference of the customers as well, even among craft brewers that make quote-unquote foreign style beers. While imports aren't as fresh, typically I've noticed that the packaging is far superior to small craft breweries, to the point that freshness of the craft beer doesn't make up for what it lacks in packing quality. I don't want to name names, but I've had a objectively flawed beer from small craft producers, and then he puts in parentheses, Trub and can, undercarbonated, diacetyl, etc., many times in just the past year. For the prices I am paying, I am now almost exclusively going with imports, because at least I know that the quality is good, assuming it hasn't been on the shelf too long, he puts in parentheses, and it's often cheaper than what I can get from the brewer a mile away. My question is, should retailers be pushing customers towards imports more? I guess we can't complain that imports are going away if they aren't being showcased and more education is not being provided about them. Or do imports need to do more to promote their product and get out there like Krumbacher has done? Thanks. Old World Beer Lover. Awesome letter. Thank you so much. And I think that we probably have a lot to say about that, don't we, Mike?
For sure.
Yeah. You want me to go or you want to go?
You can go first. I feel like this is something you're very passionate about.
Okay. Well, let me pull it up. Let me just have it up so I can see, because I think I want to reference the stuff, but you're right in many different ways. Yes, imports need to do a better job. Yes, imports need to do. Oh, is it that? There's like some static from it. Okay. Imports need to do a better job of promoting their product. Whoops. Okay. That's something just happened there. You can just close it. Doesn't matter, Serge. They need to do a better job. But yes, they are being pushed out. Craft breweries are pretty much pushing everything else in the craft scene out, including beer bars, I would just say. In some sense, they are. I mean, in a lot of ways. The brewery a mile down the road.
Different show.
I mean, different show. I'm not gonna. And by the way, I'm not hating on them for doing it. But they're doing what they got to do. But the fact of the matter is, Belgians make the best saison.
Get out of here. That's not true.
You don't think so?
I don't. I do. Literally don't. But
okay,
we don't have to.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I would say okay. So
Germans make the best lagers.
Or
that continental lagers are the best lagers.
Yeah. I would say of the Old World, the saison, Belgians make certainly as good a saison as anyone, and if it
consistently
to old world beer lovers' point, it's a safer bet, I would say, going with a saison.
Like any saison off the shelf, sure.
Yeah. Now, if you're going to go to upstate New York or upstate Vermont,
right,
that's different. Those are world class. Those might be class leading.
I think there are higher peaks.
Yeah,
but there's less consistency, and there's a lot of tomfoolery going on in the.
And there is a lot of, even I would say domestically, there's a lot, even locally, there's a lot of good and bad examples of a lot of styles, even American styles. What
do you think about the fact that my perception is that an average consumer in Chicago is more likely to buy a brown ale from a local brewery than a brown ale from an English brewery, if they existed or whatever. Like, I think that
100% right.
Why do you think that is? And do you think it's a problem? If you think it's a problem, how can it be remedied? Like, how do you?
It's not a problem if there's world-class examples of the style being made.
Sure.
If the local stuff is pushing out import as a whole, as a category, which it is. So hazy is pushing out brown ale, is pushing out certainly,
you're getting the illusion
imports.
of choice, but most of those things
Belgian beer,
the same.
Abbey styles, all that sort of stuff, except if it's you're talking Chimay, like that size, it's all getting pushed out because the numbers are down, because people just aren't drinking that stuff right now. And that is a problem, especially because people aren't, talk about like domestic. Who's making good? So we had Boss Kuhn from Dodola on draft, right? Mm-hmm. It's also available in package. Who the heck in America, give me any example of anyone who can touch that beer? Even
it's
close.
It's a beautiful little boy.
No one can touch that thing. So like, there's a lot of that Belgian stuff out there that's beautiful beer, but everyone now thinks of Belgian beer as strong and sweet.
Right. Well, there's a disconnect between specifically Belgian beer and how you sell beer in America. Like the idea that Orval is Orval, like that old saying that they had where like it doesn't have a category. It's not any of these things you're trying to tell me it is. That's not how you sell beer in America. It's not how you think about beer in America for the most part. America, even producing beer in America for the most part comes out of home brewing, right? Which for the most part, the best guys are really good at the BJCP guidelines. And like you got good at home brewing because you followed these guidelines of style. Now it's clearly deviated from that quite a bit, but that's just not what the Belgians specifically do. They reject it. Mm-hmm. So there's a misalignment of quality and creativity in the Belgian world and how you need to present a beer to
and
sell in America.
There's also meh Belgian beer.
For sure.
That's the other thing. Like some of those beers that you get, they're junk, man. There's some junk Belgian beer out there as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So
then what do you think's going on in the consumer mind? It seems like would that be a trust issue where they don't trust things they haven't had before, and that with this craft beer consumer we thought was exploratory and searching for new things really isn't. They actually like want to have some sort of belief that the thing they've had is the thing they're going to have again, but they just want a different color of it. Because I think
there's a bunch. I do think that people want. I think that English and traditional English and Belgian ales, and even German ales, are out of style right now. People want American
not BJCP style, just like they're out of fashion.
Yeah. Sorry,
that's fine. It's
no,
a
they're yes,
correction.
They are. Yeah, they're out of fashion. I do think branding and formatting can help or hurt.
So like Rathaus, for example, a very traditional German beer that is probably, I guess according to the blind tasting, not, but to me, like one of the the
It is one of
the
the-
best tasting things, the best versions of that
Yeah.
version of that.
They made the
style.
finals. I mean,
the best version of that style and incredibly attractive packaging.
Yeah.
What is a beer that you find that you think should sell better and you think has those things, but it's just like not happening in import world?
The Dole. They have everything. They have the packaging. It's strong. That's the one thing maybe it has against it.
The beer is strong.
The beer tends to be strong alcohol-wise, but it is so beautiful. It is so well put together, but it's not in a popular style.
Which is just Belgian beer.
Belgian beer.
Right, they don't really put style.
And even now, I know there's people thinking like, yeah, I'm not really into Belgian beers. Guys, if you had this beer,
Right.
it is a beautiful
Right.
beer. And there were people when we had it on draft who would crush it, who do not drink Belgian beer. Because guess what? It's good beer.
I operate a brewery that ostensibly makes one Belgian style of beer, and I would categorize myself as someone who broadly doesn't like Belgian beer. I don't like
Right.
most of the versions of those Trappist ales. They're just not my thing.
Right.
But there are versions of Belgian beers. It'd be like saying I don't like American beer.
Right.
Like Belgian has gotten hurt by the fact that they're just like lumped all together.
Lumped all together and just butchered in the U.S. brew
Yes.
pub market,
Oh,
to use
yeah.
an old term. You
Right.
know, there's some Belgian breweries that are breweries here that do Belgian beer, and they just are gross.
Right.
They're gross.
They're not good. And Saison,
Or even if they're not gross to
specifically-
you, like they're sweet and boozy, and they're not supposed to be like that.
Right. And for me personally, Saison specifically, it's very disheartening often to taste commercial versions of American Saisons that are like forced carbonated in cans. And not that I'm like 100% a purist, like you have to re-ferment it and you have to do these things, but you have to treat those beers as differently as you treat a lager. If you were to make that beer, make a lager and knock it in at the temperatures you knock your IPA in at and push it through the process at the same rate you push it through an IPA and use American base malts and American hops, it's not going to taste like the thing you want. And I think part of the reason American craft lager took so long, everyone was like, it's going to be the next big thing. It's going to be the next big thing. I think it's starting to happen a little bit. It's like it's coming into its own. It's because people were making bad versions of it. No one wanted to tell their friends. But they were making beers that they were fermenting too warm. They were making beers that were afterthought. Great brewery, but they were afterthoughts to how they actually like fit into their portfolio. They weren't the ones that kept the lights on, and people liked the fact that they made stuff. Like every brewery likes the lager they make, but it's not like you have to be very critical of those things, and like you have to treat those beers differently. They don't all fit in. They're not your USO5 yeast. They're not. They behave. They're different animals. Literally, they're different organisms.
They're very different. So, and I think imports have been having a hard time. I think that for a lot of reasons. I mean, there's just the local stuff is just going to dominate in a lot of ways, because now here's another thing that I think one of the reasons that stuff's getting left on the shelf a little bit is people want new. But when I was talking about the beer that changed my life and I started going through all this stuff, to me, I wanted to like get an understanding of the OGs of like the kings of the style. But now
a different time though.
Yes,
there weren't you weren't getting inundated on your Instagram feed with the new thing that came out from the brewery you can walk to.
Sure, I'm not saying that I would not be doing exactly something very different had I started right now.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying I was better then. In any way, I was luckier.
Yeah.
You know, but nowadays people see that thing on the shelf, and it's not. Even though they've never had it, it's not new, because they've gone into stores for years now and seen that thing on the shelf before. And it's not interesting to them. It's not enticing to them because they've seen it there. It's always there.
Right.
Where this other thing was not there yesterday, and it's not going to be there next week.
It's
a one-off.
It's American craft beer's own fault, right?
100%.
Like we did this to ourselves. If you view this as an issue, we did it to ourselves. Like we ate our own babies. You know,
it's an issue. It's an issue for the consumer. It's an issue for the industry overall. It's an issue for the brewers. It's an issue. I think some of these brewers are in the process of painting themselves into corners, because guess what? you're now 5 years old, and like think of how you could have dialed in a recipe to literally have a world-class example of something.
Most brews that are 5 years old at this point have at least one beer that they have dialed in like that. It's really hard to be a brewery that doesn't have at least one beer you make on a regular basis and survive for that long.
Okay.
It may not be like you make it like as much as Trumer makes Pilsner, but
sure. I would be willing to. I'd argue that your creative energy is going into the concept more than execution, and it could be much more execution focused, which is what homebrewing. That's what homebrewing is about. It's about executing. Right.
I think it was about that.
It's about executing what you want to do, which is why I didn't frankly get into it, because it was like it just wasn't interesting to me, which is maybe maybe not interesting to these brewers now. But
but if refining process and I think most brewers, even when they're not brewing the same beer over and over again, the same exact recipe, are brewing very similar recipes, and the good ones are doing that. The great brewers, like really good brewers, are working to improve their process all the time, and it's hard because the better you get at improving your process, the less marketable the thing you did is.
If you make 100 beers a year, how can you do that? A lot of breweries make 100 beers a year now.
We make 12.
I'm not saying you, but what my point is, how do you do it? If
100 different beers.
Yes.
Sure. I mean, you learn. A lot
of breweries do that.
Yeah. I misunderstood what you were saying.
Yeah.
You learn your brew house, you learn your packaging equipment, and so overall the quality should go up, right? And you should continue to do that.
We're talking about undercarbonation, diacetyl, like what the old world beer lovers talking about. Yes, that should improve.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So let me reiterate. Yes, that should improve.
Right.
But dialing in a beautiful beer, a Pliny the Elder, Alpine Nelson, a Edward. I'm talking about that stuff.
I think it's more dialing in a style and an approach to that style is what we're seeing now.
Okay.
Where it's like instead of making up so much Pliny, they're making 7 different hazy IPAs repeating.
Roughly the same base with minor tweaks.
Right, which is essentially that idea, right? How do we pursue this flavor outcome? It might not be exactly the same because we're using different hop combinations or different levels of attenuation or adjunct usage as like part of the marketing of the beer, but they are getting better at how they go about that. And I think that is happening for a lot of breweries like that. Like I think I just don't think it's, I think that the runway is so wide on a lot of those things. And granted, I don't make them.
What do you mean by that runway is so wide?
There's a lot of margin for error in making a beer that is driven by bombast, and intensity of flavor is the goal. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's balanced intensity, but it's intensity and impactfulness is the goal. You just use a lot more stuff, use a lot more ingredient typically. Rather than this amount of time and fermentation down to the hours or these like this temperature of the yeast. Or
I've learned over time, like we talk about Ivan Debat's, like he's over time figured out what tank geometry works best.
Right.
I mean,
right. Which is but like to be fair to people that are actively trying to make a business out of brewing.
Totally.
How do you communicate that to a consumer in a way that's effective enough for them to understand that this beer is more special because other than it tasting so much better, they can't deny it, which when you're making...
It's hard to do.
It's almost impossible to do that on a broad scale. You can... I think one of the things people don't understand in production breweries is that You can also just like have a smaller brewery and really talk directly to people. That's some of the things social media allows you to do if you use it in a specific way. You'll have a smaller brewery, and it will be a different grind, but you can do that. It's not impossible. But I don't know, man. Like it's hard to begrudge people for honing in a whole overall approach to a style that they've been effective at making rather than a single beer, just because of the economics of actually running a brewery. But that's far afield from like the fact that a lot of people are honing in the same style, which is now pushing out a more robust amount of selection of styles from import. That's what we started talking about, right? Should we bring it back to that?
Sure.
And be like that. What is it like that?
Yeah, sorry, old world beer lover.
Yeah. I'm not even sure what his questions were anymore. Like,
The question was, should retailers be pushing imports more, or should imports be pushing more themselves? And I think the answer is both.
Sure.
Retailers should be pushing imports more. I think a lot of retailers, one, are disinterested, as are their customer base. Maybe because their customer base is disinterested, they want to go and follow what their customers are interested in and learn more about what their customers are interested in.
It's good business.
That
right?
is good business.
It's smart business.
I'm not smart. What I do is I do what I want and hope people come to it.
This is why we're friends.
Right.
I think it's smart and it's not smart at the same time, right? You have to provide things that people want to buy, or else you don't have a business. But if you have no point,
or they can go anywhere else,
right? And then your thing is just like we're the closest drive to get this thing,
right?
Which is a terrifying way to compete
in
the marketplace. It's
horrifying. Oh my gosh, that to me is. And that is one of the things that I've always been thankful for and stated that way, as I realize you are driving past other liquor stores to come to mine. That is not lost on me. That means a lot. And there has to be reason for it. And hopefully, we're living up to it and introduce you guys to some beers that maybe you hadn't had, that you would never have found another way, which is awesome. I love that. We love it discovering beers too. I mean, we love it.
What can I ask you a question?
No.
Okay. I'm going to ask you.
Yes, fine.
What do you think you guys can do better? You're probably some of the best at it as far as a retail component goes in Chicago for introducing people to imported beers. What can you guys do better to introduce people to beer styles they might not have approached before or don't know that they like yet?
Well, we just started doing a staff's pick after 5 years of saying we were going to do it, and we haven't rotated them out yet. So we've only done one. So things like that, I think, like putting out there what we like, putting stuff on social media or however about earnest, like not selling, just being like, I like this beer. This is a good beer that I like, and this is why. Just kind of communicating our passion more and finding effective ways to do it and being earnest about it. We can always do that better. That is something I wish that we did a little bit more, is call out that these are important and why we think they're important. Yeah. We can always do that more. So I wish we did that a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's what you like. I think there's a strange fallacy floating around right now that you have to run every business as if you were a publicly traded Fortune 500 company, and that every decision you have to make is something that's going to make you the maximum return on that amount of time. And I think part of running a small business is embracing the fact that isn't going to be possible because someone's going to make those decisions better than you, and doing the things that you believe in and you can connect to human beings on a human level more than a lot of those companies can. Yeah. So doing that type of stuff is huge, just in a for loyalty and for curation of as you curate the beers, you curate your customers too. What you put out there is what you get back.
Right.
So I
and for us here, I mean, I've stepped away from that stuff, sadly, but there's other people now doing it. I do it some, but I mean, it's other people taking that idea that they kind of saw what I was doing and believed it, and they're doing it now in their own little way. And it's been, I mean, hopefully people dig it. So yeah, but I think we're being told by Nah, I don't think we're gonna do a
we're
show.
good,
I
we're
think
good.
Serge is telling us he's going to fade us out.
And he's playing the
He's
Wrap It Up
saying-
music. He's got the Dave Chappelle Wrap It Up music box playing.
And he's got his finger on the fader, and it's like quivering. He can't
Yeah.
wait to fade.
Yeah.
So anyway, cool. Successful episode 2.
Yeah.
Is this season 2, episode 2, or what the heck is this?
I don't know. Yeah,
figure
sure.
it
Season
out.
2, episode 2 of the Beer Temple podcast. Chris, do we have some quippy thing to go out on?
I just had Dominga or something like that from New Belgium. It's really good. Also, De La Seine has something that they did with Perennial, and it's awesome. So go get those.
What we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard, seen from again, 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 again.